everything I do, everything I lead. Without good people in my team, I don't have a good team.
Welcome to the FoodGrads Podcast, the podcast that takes you on a fascinating journey into the hearts and minds of the amazing people who work in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. My name is Veronica, and I am a PhD candidate studying fat-based food emulsions. On this podcast, we share insights from professionals at all stages of their careers, find out what they do, why they do it, and how they are changing the food world one day at a time. So no matter what your passion is, there's always something for everyone in food, and we'll help you find it. Hello everyone, it's your host Veronica. Welcome back to the FoodGrads Podcast. In today's episode, we are exploring the world of food auditing. What's it like to be a food auditor? What's it like being a part of a food audit? How audits are helpful to organizations and the different types. But more importantly, we are talking about building a career in food safety, obtaining training, and how to stand out amongst the crowd when you are going to an interview, even if you don't have a lot of work experience. And we are getting all that information today from our guest, Gordon Hayburn, Vice President of Food Safety and Quality at Trophy Foods, Inc. Trophy Foods is a Canadian-owned and operated producer of edible nuts, confectionary, and bulk foods. Gordon has over 30 years of experience in food manufacturing, food safety, and auditing in both the private and public sector. In addition to being a graduate of a food technologist program, he also has 2 master's degrees, a master's in food safety and control, and an LLM in food law. Gordon has done so much more than that, and I could spend a lot of time talking about that. But, however, soon after the release of this podcast episode, Gordon will be embarking on a new journey of food safety consultant, so keep an eye out for that. This episode of the podcast is powered by Careers Now. Careers Now is Food and Beverage Ontario's multi-year workforce development initiative that is connecting students and job seekers with employers in Ontario's food and beverage processing industry for exciting career opportunities. Check out careersnow.ca for more information on exciting jobs, career information, industry mentors, and training opportunities for professional development. Well, thank you so much, Gordon, for taking time to come on this show. I'm really excited to speak with you about the world of food safety and how you can really take food safety as a lifelong career, take different paths, grow. I'd love to talk more today about auditing. I know you've had a lot of past experience in that, and really open the eyes to what that career path is like and just the ideas of auditing, because I don't think a lot of people or young people might think about that. So thanks for coming on the show.
Very happy to be here and always happy to chat about food safety. It's not just a career, it's a passion. And I'm very lucky I've been managing my life to be able to do this job. So very happy to be here and share whatever I can with your listeners.
Amazing. Yes, food safety is such an important role. And I always talk about to other people, you think of firefighters and paramedics, and of course they're heroes and they're those that keep us safe. But behind every single day, we're affected by food and the food we eat, and we put a lot of trust into it without maybe necessarily thinking about that. And it's those food safety professionals that really allow us not to think about it as much.
Absolutely. And I'm sure a lot was talked about it, and we've seen it before. And there's posters out there that fundamentally say, not all heroes wear capes. And in our case, our heroes wear hats, hairnets, and protective clothing. So yeah, not all heroes need a cape.
Well, I'll let you take it away. And just to give us, our audience, a little bit more of a background of who you are, would you be able to briefly talk about what your role is currently and where you work?
Sure. So my current role is I'm the Vice President of Food Safety and Quality Assurance at Trophy Foods. Trophy Foods are a privately owned Canadian company, although we also sell a lot to the USA. Many people will not necessarily know Trophy Foods because we are primarily a private label manufacturer, but I have no doubt you have eaten our delicious products, snacks, chocolate-covered almonds, trail mixes. We saw growth in our products with COVID in the whole baking arena. So we do a lot of products in that category as well. And we manufacture for all of the major retailers in Canada. And we have many retail customers in the US as well. And so I look after the QA team across 2 sites. We have a site in Toronto, in Mississauga area, and then we have one in Calgary. So that's where you find me at the moment.
Wonderful. And I'd love to just talk about maybe some key roles to how you got there because I mean, being the vice president of food safety and quality assurance, like that to me is one of the highest roles that you can get in food safety. And I'd love to know maybe a few key steps of how you got there.
Sure. So first of all, there's two things. You don't get here by accident, okay, and it's not gifted. And I think we need to recognize that as professionals. This is a career pathway, and you talked early on about auditing as a career, and we'll come back to that. But it is a pathway. So I was very fortunate in a way in that I only ever wanted to study food science and food technology. I had a family member who was a chef. He won a very big award many years ago. We went to the College of Food Technology where he was presenting with his award. And I was not remotely interested in cooking. I was just enthralled, but I was enthralled by all these pieces of equipment. And someone saying, oh, yeah, well, that's the kind of machine that we use to make dehydrated soups. Oh, and that machine there, this is how we make canned vegetables. And my eyes were open because I didn't know that that existed. I have no idea where I thought food came from, supermarket food came from, but it didn't cross my mind. And so from that, I was 16 at the time. And from that moment onwards, I aimed my high school study to be able to apply to study food technology. So that's how I got into the career. And then I've done a host of everything. I worked in soft drink manufacturer. I was QA supervisor. I ended up working in cook chill operations as I moved through. I then ended up working in the and I am probably, I'd like to think I am older than I look. So you make sure you put up a good picture of me on this podcast. I ended up working in London for one of the London boroughs, one of the government agencies around the time in the mid 90s where there was a whole lot of changes around EU. The UK joined the European Union. There were changes to EU legislation. And many of those boroughs were then employing food scientists, food technologists to support the environmental health officers. At that point, the environmental health officers were doing everything. They were doing food, health and safety, noise, pollution, all sorts of things. And what the boroughs recognized was they probably needed more food specialists. So I did that for a while. Then after doing that, I actually moved to my first job in auditing with the Meat and Livestock Commission, which was in the UK. And then from there, it just developed. I was also lucky to be around at the start of third-party auditing. So prior to third-party standards, there were private standards. And then I was very lucky to be involved in the launch of ETSIS, which eventually became the BRC standard, and so on. So that kind of got me into auditing. Then I had my first career change. Personal reasons made me want to give up my full-time role. And then when I was coming back into the industry, I decided I wanted to try something different. So I ended up as a professor, the equivalent of a professor here in North America, a senior lecturer at the University of Wales, where I taught food science, food law, and so on. And I actually introduced auditing and risk assessment as modules to that program. They didn't exist before then. And then I did that for 10 years and then had my second career change where I thought I don't want to become institutionalized and just be an academic, although there's nothing wrong with that. And
Mm.
I'd like to do some more of that as I move on. So I went back into the industry and I ended up working for a company called Tata Global Beverages. You may know some of the brands, for example, Tetley Tea, 8 O'Clock Coffee. There are many. Mount Everest Mineral Water. They have some huge brands. Tata are an enormous company. I've got back into the manufacturing sector there because I had an interesting background in science and law. And then I was there for a while. And then in 2011, moved to Canada. So I've decided Canada was where I wanted to be. And I was unemployed in Canada for one whole day. And then I got a job. Yeah, I know. So I was no drain on the Canadian economy. And then I actually got a job with a company called SCI Global, who are one of the world's leading audit companies. And then I did that for a few years, and that was fantastic. But I was traveling way much more than I wanted to. And then I just happened to be approached about this job at Trophy Foods. And so I ended up here. So I've been all over the world and all over the map. I've worked in food service and retail and academia and enforcement and manufacturing. Then all of a sudden, you kind of now feel a bit more formed and fully formed, and you end up as a vice president of food safety and quality.
Well, I love that, and I'm happy you chose Canada as the place. It's a great place, I can tell you that.
Me too. Me too. I am. I just to add to that, in at the end of 2019, I became a Canadian citizen. I'm very happy to be here. So thank you to all Canadians for allowing me to be part of your wonderful country.
Well, congratulations. I'm a born here Canadian, so it's always great to hear people coming here, enjoying it and loving it. But going back to the food safety at hand, one of the things that we could take this conversation so many different ways in terms of how your experiences have been in the industry, how you moved up in quality. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you today about is auditing. I know that you've had a lot of experience with that, but to me, when I've done articles for food grads and such, I'll be honest, auditing has come across to me as a very confusing career path to get into from from a student perspective, like how to actually, because I think a lot of us, when we think of auditors, we think of restaurant auditors, food
Hmm.
inspectors. But then I know
Yep.
that it's a whole different ballpark when it comes to auditing in a food manufacturing facility. And I know you need to have 5 years of experience, or there's a lot of hoops that you have to go into. So before we talk about that portion, I'd love to talk about just what is auditing from a perspective for someone who might not know a lot about that, and maybe the different forms of auditing.
Sure. So first of all, auditing is a hugely interesting and exciting career. And you're right, we don't know enough about it. So auditing is, and particularly what I specialized in, is third party or independent auditing. So there are internal auditing where you will audit your own company. That's sometimes called internal or first party auditing. There are audits where you audit with a customer. So you have a business relationship. Then a customer audit, sometimes also called a second party audit. And then third party audits are independent audits. That's where I was employed by an organization to go and audit a company. And I had no vested interest. The third party auditor has no vested interest in the outcome of the audit. The audit result is the audit result. We're not paid on the basis of a positive result. We're not needing that product to supply other customers. So the independent auditor, in theory, has no interest in the outcome other than to make sure that the company being audited is treated fairly and is allowed to demonstrate where they are complying with the standard. And that's the key to it. For me, one of the challenges with auditing, and sadly, I still see some auditors do it. It's not, in my opinion, okay, and this is important. This is my
Okay.
opinion, but it's based on many years of experience. Okay, I don't feel as an auditor I should be going to a company to look for non-conformity. I just think that's the wrong way, because what I know and what you know and hopefully your listeners know is most of the people working in this sector, in food manufacturing and food service and so on, we are absolutely trying our best to do the best we can. We are out there every day. We care about the product. We care a lot about the people who consume our products. Right? And we are trying to do the best job possible. So I always feel if you go and audit to look for non-conformity, it comes at it as a very negative way of doing something. And when I train auditors and when I audited myself, I will ask the auditor to say, your objective is to go to a company and ask that company to demonstrate to you why they believe they are compliant with the standard. What practices and processes and protocols and behaviors do they have that makes them believe they are meeting the stated requirements of the standard, whether that's the BRC standard, SQF, IFS, and so many others. So again, I feel it's the company who's being audited. That's their time to shine. What I'll say is this team have been working all year, every day working hard, trying to make sure they are doing everything they can. So let them show off. Let them show you as an auditor what they're doing. And then you will say, okay, but do you have anything here, or can I see something there? You will find the one or two areas where there may need to be some improvement, or there may be some areas that they're not quite addressing. And then that's a much better approach as opposed to going somewhere to try and find flaws. I just think it's a very negative way of doing it. So for an audit, it's looking at compliance against a documented standard. And again, there has to be a standard to audit against. Okay, if there's no standard to audit against, it's not an audit. Okay, because both people need to know what the expectation is. So for me, an audit is an independent assessment against a stated standard done in a positive way, and ultimately to determine how much or how close the company being audited is to meeting all the requirements of that standard. Hopefully, that's a nicer way of saying what an audit is.
No, that definitely does answer a lot of questions. I just my head went to first of all, I appreciate how it's more of a positive experience in the sense that you're pointing out, showing off because I can say I wish that I was in food safety a little bit more to get to that feeling because I know when I experienced as a QA tech, my first audit, I was quite terrified. I will honestly admit.
You clearly weren't audited by me, then you would never have been terrified.
Oh, I guess not because it was coming out graduating and such. It kind of felt a little bit like a test again, just because I'd never experienced it before. Had really good
Mhm.
support from management, but it was just a new experience. I know I'd probably feel differently now, but one of the things that you pointed out was that I guess I'm trying to get a better grasp of the standards in terms of what they're looking for. So for the third party auditors, would the auditor be coming in with a list of things that they're looking for, and they would deduct marks from that list if it's not compliant? Or how how does that work?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a yes and no. That's almost it's a depends. So some audit standards are a scoring standard, and they may have certain amount of points allocated to certain activities, and then there would be a demerit system based on any negative findings. So some have that. Most of the third party standards that we see a lot of in use now, what we're looking for is compliance, and then any non-compliance will be graded as either a minor, a major, or a critical nonconformity. With minor nonconformities, these are areas where things are generally under control, and you would say that the food is inherently safe to eat, but there may be some procedural or some documentation things where they could just be a little sharper, a little neater. But overall, you as an auditor don't have concerns about the integrity of the product. So that would probably be of a minor nature. A major would be more serious, major for a reason, and it may be where the company are really failing to address some key components of their food safety plan. And again, a major issue, if left uncontrolled, could probably lead to unsafe products. So again, it's more significant. And then the word critical sums it all up. This is where there is a failure. It's likely to be that the product is probably not safe to eat or illegal, because not all illegal products are unsafe. They may be illegal for other reasons. A labeling claim or a pack size or a weight issue would still be illegal. So this is where you would grade the nonconformities slightly differently. Now, each standard has their own terminology, but they're all, for all intents and purposes, looking at the same. They're looking at very minor areas of failure, slightly more serious, and then the very serious. So that's what you do. So auditors will often audit with a checklist, which is based on the standard they're auditing against. But here's the key. The manufacturing site have had access to that standard, to that checklist forever. So
Mm,
when they're developing their own systems, they should be developing them along the lines of the requirements, because these are not secret. It's not like there's
right.
some kind of secret code. So again, it's also important that the sites realize that you had lots of time to ask yourself these questions. And that's where internal auditing comes in. So a site that has a good internal audit program will have asked themselves those questions many times over. And they should be comfortable that they have all the information they need. So when the third party or the independent auditor does come in, they're saying, yeah, that's a great question. We've asked ourselves that question several times over the past several years, and we feel very comfortable we have it addressed, because it's not a secret. There's no weird code here. It's very open, and you can
Mhm.
get free access to all of the standards and all of the checklists.
Well, that would make sense. I mean, you don't want it to be a secret. Food safety is not supposed to be this like hidden secret of where no, it should be I mean, transparency is supposed to be one of the
Mhm.
key aspects of food safety that everyone should be on the page about. They're like it should not be inherently secretive.
No, absolutely not. And it's not. And again, when people talk about, unfortunately, people who are not hugely experienced in auditing or who may not have actually qualified as auditors themselves, there's a lot of people who are very negative about auditing. Okay. They will often mislead by talking about stupid things like, well, if the standard says X, as long as you're doing X, you're complying. And then they'll give really weird examples like, well, if the standard says you can have one piece of glass in the product. So the standard, I've heard people say, well, if the standard says, you can have one piece of glass in a bag of pasta and you're getting one or less, you're fine. That's just nonsense. That's stupid people saying stupid things. The baseline of any standard is that the product must be compliant with legislation as an absolute minimum. So again,
Mm,
people need to understand that the baseline level of any standard is legal compliance. These third party standards are looking at things over and above that in terms of systems and policies and procedures for continuous improvement and to make sure you comply with your customer and consumer requirements and expectation. So it's never a secret. It never has been. If you are a new company, looking to be audited or looking for certification, all the information is out there. You will go and you will look and you will decide which of these standards may be right for you and your business. And then when you register or when you log into that standard, and you don't even have to log into the company's website, all of these standards you will find for free if you with a Google search.
mhm,
Um, you will find it and you will say, yes, this seems to work for us. I like this one because it's more prescriptive, or I like this one because it seems to address some of the activities that we are doing more than some of the others. So companies will find the one that fits them as an organization, but it's not a secret. And again, let's be honest. There's no reason for companies not to prepare well for audit and not to get better every time. Because this is
mhm.
the thing, it's about continuously improving. And again, just to be clear, and I say this a lot, you may get an audit, and let's just give it a score because
Okay.
it's easy. Okay. So you may be audited this year and you may score a 95. Then next year you may score a 92. That does not mean you're worse. What it means, and based on what was assessed, you scored this. But each auditor will look at different things. The sample will be different. What was going on in the plant at the time will be different. So just because a site may have scored, an A or a double A or a 90 or a 80, that doesn't mean that they're actually getting worse. Okay, what it means is the audit assess slightly different things, but you as a company know that we are better this year than last year. Okay, so it's about continuous improvement. So don't get hung up on, well, this company got this grade or this score, and now this year they are 3 points down. That in itself is no indication of poor performance. It may well be that the auditor looked at different samples, or the site themselves have looked to improve and challenging themselves and have implemented stronger procedures, more frequent testing, and so on. So they themselves are setting a higher bar. So it's important to recognize that it's not about as easy as, 100 is the mark, and if the closer you are, you're more perfect. It's not about that.
That's a really good point because when an auditor comes in, from my understanding as well, they also don't come in, here's the score of 92, and there's like, that's it, you're done. There's ways to improve. It's provided advice on how to improve that. So, like you said, there might be this year there was different products that were made than last year, and it's a learning process. You might have different staff that were present this year, and
Yeah,
it's just a point in time, but you should always be
all
using
of
it.
that.
Yeah.
All of that. It's a snapshot. It's a moment in time. And that's why it's about making sure that you as a site feel comfortable that generally you have answers to most of the questions. So once the site has been within one of the certification standards for a few years, it would be very unusual. I'm not saying it's not possible and it doesn't happen, but it would be very unusual for there to be a really systemic failure that had not been picked up either on a previous audit or by the site's own internal audits.
Mhm.
So what you do find is the number of minor things that are identified changes year on year, depending on the sample, depending on what was happening at the time of the audit. Who was in the manufacturing site, what products were being made on the line, what was happening the day before, what time of year, all of those things. So there are other things that will influence the minor components, but there should not be a systemic failure. If you have been audited for several years and you have a good internal audit plan, that would be generally a surprise to me. It does happen. It's very rare, and it would be, it would be considered unusual. So not impossible, but unusual.
Well, one thing that I thank you for that. I did want to shift the conversation a bit just because I know that a lot of our audience is primarily students and such. And one of the things that I keep going back to that you said at the beginning of the conversation was that food safety is you don't just get there, like there's a plan and such. And I wanted to dive more into that and the idea of personal, like developing your career in food safety. And I know you've had
Hmm.
experience teaching that. And one of the things that I've wanted to know is once you graduate from food science, you're an undergraduate, you want to pursue a career, a long time career in food safety. It's not like you just go back to university, you get your food safety 1 year certification and you're done for the rest of your career. No, there's a lot of learning and such. So I wanted to touch upon like where how do you start to develop a food safety career after you graduate? How do you
That
define a path, so to say?
That that's a fantastic question, and one that I will give you my thoughts on it, because you're right. I think the first thing as graduates, and many of your listeners are graduates, and I graduated for the first time more years ago than I care to remember. Okay. And of course, the first thing you do when you graduate is you think you've arrived. Oh,
Mhm.
you just think, oh my God, I'm so hot. I am Mr. Big Stuff. I graduated. I have this piece of paper.
Yep.
I wore the gown. I had the cap. I look great. I have the photograph. Okay. So, and I think the first thing to recognize is that's really day one. Okay. That's not the end. That's actually the start of what hopefully is going to become a long and very fruitful and ultimately profitable. Because let's be honest, we have a passion for it, but we also need to be paid. Okay. A very profitable career. So the first things first is to recognize that, yes, I graduated. What that tells an employer, so what that tells me as someone who hires, that tells me that one, you have a scientific mind, and two, you have the capability of learning. Okay? That's what that really shows me. Okay? Because I don't know the specifics of what you studied on your course, and I don't know the curriculum of every university. Okay? So
Mhm.
I will say, yes, I'm now dealing with someone who is clearly a scientist. They typically graduate in biosciences or chemistry or food science and so on. We tend to see most people coming into our industry from that sector, although not exclusively, but that seems to be a very common way. So that's the first message it gives me. So here's the first thing that you have to do if you want to impress me as a hiring manager is you have to show me what it is that you bring that makes you different to every other graduate I'm seeing. So what are your areas of interest? Have you done anything external? Did you attend any conferences? So, for example, and I know you spoke with one of my colleagues some time ago, and you've probably spoken with
Yes.
several other people, but the Ontario Food Protection Association, or OAFP, Ontario Association of Food Protection, they're now making it free for students to attend those conferences. Then I suggest you get there. Okay. And not only do you listen to the speakers, which should be interesting, but you find people who have been in the industry a long time and you start your network then. Yeah, I spoke at the OAFP, not the one recently, the last one before that, and I spoke with a lot of students and I said, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. We don't have a lot in common at the moment, but you are the future stars. You are the currently talented young people that are going to keep me safe as I get older and as a consumer.
Good way to look at it.
Absolutely. Oh, one of the, when people say, what are you going to do when, when you grow up? And I've kind of always thought, I think I'd like to be a grumpy old man. Okay. But in order for me to be that grumpy old man, I need to be allowed to become an old man. And I need people to keep me safe. So I need
Yes.
these future food safety stars. So please network with people, reach out, make contact, ask questions. Okay. Attend these webinars, attend these in-person conferences, learn, okay, get interested in different aspects. So when I interview you for a position, I know you've graduated, but I will say, well, what are you seeing? What is it that's currently about happening in the area of food safety that you think is particularly interesting or intriguing? I'm not saying you're expert in it, but tell me what you've read recently that makes you think, oh my goodness, I really don't know enough about this, or oh, I didn't really know that that was an issue in food. Like, I want to know that you have the interest and the passion that goes beyond, just I graduated. And I know it seems a little bit old school, I guess, but that's who we are because we do this because we have a drive and a passion to do it. I said, of course we do it for money, but there are other jobs you can do for money. You didn't get into food safety, you're not going to be a millionaire, I can tell you that much. Okay, so you're not going to be a millionaire in food safety, and that's not the career for it. But if you want to continue to enjoy and make a difference, then you are. So right from the start, make sure that you consider the day you graduate as day one of this new life or career or something. That's the first thing. The second thing is recognize there are several areas within food science, technology, and so on, food safety, that you may have thought you were interested in. Try them. Some people find that actually, I really do enjoy product development. I thought it's more than I thought it was. Some people say, I don't really like to work in product development because you seem to put a lot of effort in and very little product gets to the marketplace. And that doesn't necessarily give me fulfillment. Some people will say, I like people and I want to work in areas where I can deal with more people. Some people say, I'm way more quiet than that. I actually just like being given tasks and working in the lab, doing some great work, some in-depth research, publishing some data, and so on. So it's also important to recognize there's a whole stream of different things. And sometimes finding what you don't want to do is as important as finding, yes, this is my final pathway. So there's nothing wrong with trying different things and saying, yeah, that doesn't really work for me. I thought it might be something, but it's not. And I'm still very young and I still have time to change my mind because you graduate at whatever age you are, 21, 22. Let's say, you've got 40 years of a career. Okay. Like you don't have to commit yourself on day one to
Mhm.
this thing and this thing alone. So recognize that you will change your mind, recognize that other things may attract you and may actually, stimulate your mind way much more than you thought they would. So don't feel bad about not liking one aspect of the industry. That just simply tells you that you're not going to waste time there. It's too important. Your life is too important. You want to live your best life and enjoy your work life because that's a big part of what you do, and find the things that do make a difference. So don't worry if you don't find your way on day one. Would be probably my biggest message.
That is really good advice, and I love to echo the idea that you said of it's okay to find something you don't like because that can be just as important. I mean, I think that I think a lot of I could imagine a lot of individuals, they stay in a role for too long that they don't enjoy, and just because they think maybe if they try harder, maybe they're doing something wrong, but it's not for them.
Absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with that.
But one of the things I wanted to dive again a little deeper. I know this is good general advice, but I did want to go into the specifics of food safety because again, for example, you mentioned R&D, and R&D is a role where you don't necessarily have to have you could have a degree in chemistry, you could have a degree in food science, you can be a culinary. But when it comes to food safety, for example, if you want to become an auditor or if you want to go into certain roles, you need to have these certifications. And I feel as though it can be a little overwhelming or confusing to know like what to trust for a certification or how, like when you're new in your career, do you rely on your employer to give you the certifications? Do you go on your own? Would you have any insights into those aspects of building a career in food safety in terms of certifications?
Sure. So again, we live in an age where, again, this is me sounding like an old person, the very much digital age, all of the stuff that's freely available on the internet. Okay. So again, I would encourage anyone, there are many open access courses that you can do. Many of the universities and industry organizations make these things available for free. So I would sign up and attend some of them. There's lots of stuff going on around allergy awareness. There's lots of stuff going around on food fraud. There's obviously a lot of stuff going on now about supply chain, supply chain compliance with
Right.
substitution and that type of thing. There's information on around vulnerability and threat assessment in terms of protecting the food supply from attack. So there's a whole host of stuff that you will find if you work through key websites. So work through the colleges and the universities, work through the government agencies, and then work through trade associations. So there are, for example, the OAFP is one, the Institute of Food Science and Technology, others. There are many others. So first of all, look for these and look for freely available courses, that type of thing, because you don't want to spend too much money at the moment. Okay. So these are
Okay.
very good at tasters. So I would do some of that first of all. I would also attend the various conferences that are relatively inexpensive or free. Okay, again, because that will give you some learning, that will give you some credit in terms of credit transfer, credit accumulation, that type of thing, and also professional development hours. So those are useful. So those are the first things that I would then do. I would also take where my start point is. So if I graduate, for example, in microbiology, okay, then I would say, okay, so a key part where I know I have some skills is microbiology. Then let me look at food microbiology. And then more importantly, maybe let me look at food safety microbiology, but don't exclude all the other microbiology of food, the brewing, the other times where microorganisms are used for food manufacturing in a very positive, or where quality can be impacted by microbiology as well. So not just food safety, you're a microbiologist. Let's take all these areas and let's say I have some knowledge in all of these things, but let me just push a little more in the food safety aspect. Okay, so that starts you down the path of food safety from a one area of risk, food microbiology. Once you start thinking about risk, then you then start thinking about risk assessment, and then you identify risks from other areas: chemical risk, radiological risk, allergens, physical risks. So again, it steers you down. Okay. And again, then you might say, okay, now I want to learn more about risk assessment. So are there now courses or opportunities to study them? Now there are courses that you can enroll on, and some are cost, well, some cost money, some are more expensive than others, but you may feel I actually want some formal qualification now in risk assessment, because risk assessment is a key technique in all aspects of food safety. And I would like to be able to show an employer or to show someone where I'm applying for a new job that I have gone and studied over and above what I'm learning in my job, and I've studied risk assessment. So I would say risk assessment, any type of formal qualification in risk assessment that you can show will always stand you in good stead in the food safety career, because it's one of the key skills that people need. And again, I don't think there are many people that do it well, I have to say. I think we have lots of people who are good at risk identification. They will be able to point out a risk or a hazard, but I'm not sure there are many people who can assess the significance of that risk and what to do about it. So for me, if again I was interviewing for a technical role, I would have that chat. So again, I think risk assessment, get some study in risk assessment, try and get some formal qualifications, not against necessarily any of the specific food safety standards, just as a principle. how to undertake risk assessment, understanding likelihood, understanding severity, those types of things. And there are courses available that are probably worth investing in. Invest in them yourself by all means. But if you go to a good employer, so Trophy Foods, I will talk about us. We, I think, are a good employer. I have invested, quite rightly, a lot of money and time in the team here because they are the key to everything I do, everything I lead. Without good people in my team, I don't have a good team. So, and again, I've actually been challenged by other people from other companies, and they've said to me that I find it intriguing, and I don't own this statement. I've
Mhm.
used it. They'll say, you spend a lot of money training your people, and then what do you do? What would you do if they leave you? And I say, I'd be way more worried if I didn't train them and they stayed. Okay. So again, I need good people. And if they decide that an opportunity comes along, and they have done, and I'm very lucky, I have many people that I've worked with who are now in very lovely jobs in other companies, that's an important part of the development. So good companies will invest in your training. Okay. Now, here at Trophy Foods, because Trophy Foods are the third party standard that Trophy Foods operate to is the BRC Global Standard for Food Safety, BRC. We are working to get all of the QA team to become qualified as BRC professionals because it's a
Mm.
recognized credential. It's driven by the BRC. They have to complete so many courses around risk assessment, auditing, validation, verification, root cause analysis. There's millions of things that they are doing. They have to understand the standard. And as part of that, when they complete a portfolio, they will then be an officially recognized BRC professional, and there's a logo and a badge they can use on their email signature and so on. And I certainly, if I was recruiting and someone came to me and they already showed me they were a BRC professional, because BRC is important to my company, there are other standards,
Okay.
that would definitely get them an interview. So I'm not saying it gets you the job, but that certainly jumps you to the top of the list of people I want to see. So again, use formal training, use informal training. Your employer will help you. But I think people who are driven to do it themselves and do a little bit more, always, I'm going to just say this, the cream rises to the top. It just does. So I just think you have to show yourself to be that person or those people.
Thank you so much for sharing out. See, that's the stuff I wanted to hear or just like learn a bit more because it's so easy to go on these websites and such and they can make recommendations on what to do. And you want to hear from someone who's actually in the field, who does the hiring, or someone who's had an experience, who knows what are the actual important topics that are important in food safety. And I love the idea of the risk assessment. And again, you mentioning about conferences. I haven't personally gone to a food safety conference, but I have gone to my first conference related to my PhD last year in food science. And I always knew conferences were good, but I never realized how nice and enjoyable getting those array of topics were that you just never exposed about, and it can really bring your intrigue and just have us some time to sit down and actually dive into these topics because it's so easy, just keep scrolling when you go on the internet and you don't really know what you're looking for. But going to a conference, you can go listen to the speaker, go talk to them later, have a conversation, and it can really fire up your curiosity for the topic. And there's always new studies, there's new all of this coming out. And I could only imagine it's the same for a food safety conference.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's exactly it. And again, it's about what sparks your interest. You will go and you will listen to someone and they will say something, and then you just have one of those aha moments. You'll just think,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, I hadn't thought about it from that point of view. And it just switches. It's the light bulb moments that you get. Here's the other thing, the reason that is important, and as I say this, many people that I know will hate me for it, but I don't care. Also, go to conferences and introduce yourself to people who you might have actually referenced in when you've published papers or when you were doing your undergraduate or your master's or your PhD thesis. The people who you actually cited in your work, they're there. They're at the conference.
Yeah.
Because here's the other thing, we keep thinking these people exist in some bubble because, and you almost feel like an
Yes.
imposter, that to be in the same room as someone that you've cited, and it's always interesting when you meet them. And I remember meeting several people when I was students, and first of all I thought, oh my goodness, this person's still alive. I don't know why I thought they were 1,000 years old, but that's the first thing. And then secondly, you think they're really nice people. This person, as well as being really famous in my field, they're just fundamentally a nice person. That's the second thing. And then lastly, and this is the important aspect, and I say this because I do it and it happens to me. If I get an unsolicited email or something on LinkedIn, and please, no one listening, please take this wrong, don't take it the wrong way. I get thousands and thousands of these things. Okay. And I do try my best to respond. I genuinely do. But it's just one of many things. And I have a job that I need to do, and I have other things that I need to take care of. You know? So that's the first thing. If we've met in person and you say to me, Gordon, you may not remember me, but we spoke when you were at this conference, and you said if I ever had any questions to reach out. And so I'm reaching out. I now feel an obligation to honor the
Mhm.
commitment I made to you by saying, if you need any help, reach out. So you're also more likely to get responses from people that you now know in person. Okay. Even if it was only a 2-minute conversation and a handshake, it's because I now know what you look like. When you say, I'll say, oh, yeah, that's that young gentleman that I spoke to here. Or, oh, yeah, that was the young lady who was studying the effects of ozone somewhere else. Okay. I now know who you are. You've triggered my memory. And so I know we've now passed that connection. And so I feel my obligation. I made a promise to you. If if you need help, reach out. And now I'm not going to go back on my word because integrity is everything. So it's also important that you actually establish a good network, putting faces to names, reminding people, that type of thing. So this is also not just where you study, you will make some lifelong connections. I'm now very fortunate. I quite often go to conferences where I don't actually go to that many of the presentations because I'm luckier if I know many of the presenters, and I feel I can just ask them specific questions in private afterwards rather than take up time that other people may want who don't know them. I can go afterwards and say, that was a great presentation, but can I specifically ask you about this? Because I now feel we have that connection. And that comes of meeting and reaching out and so on. So there's many benefits of going to a conference, way more than just simply hearing someone present. And I feel that a lot of people miss the networking part of that a lot.
Mhm. Well, unfortunately, Gordon, we are at the end of our conversation. I'm quite confused at where the past hour went, but clearly it must have been a really good conversation because I think that this is the type of information that I really wanted to pull out of it, just more tangible stuff that students can take to go into so
Okay. So before we go though, can I just say that we started talking about students don't really know that auditing is a career, and how you get into it. The Global Food Safety Initiative, GFSI, are currently working on now. It's a little while away, but it's very much front and center. They actually have an auditor competency and working group, and they are currently looking at how do we get people into auditing as a career way much sooner than old people like me who are now looking to do, well, this is what happens. You get to a point, you say, I don't really want to do all of this, but I'll audit because if I stay home, I'll probably get under my partner's feet and one of us will probably kill the other one. And so I better get out of there. I better get out of the hair. And this is about when you're young and you want to travel and you want to do things that you didn't know you could do this. So GFSI, I encourage everyone to go to the GFSI website, Global Food Safety Initiative, and start looking at the information that's coming out from there, because sooner rather than later, they will start talking about auditor competency and auditing it more as a career from a much earlier age than it currently happens at the moment. Because we as an industry know people like myself are getting way much older, and we need the bright young people who are the future of our industry to get into that industry way much quicker. So in the next, I'm going to say next 1 to 3, 4 years, I think you will see a significant change on how people become an auditor. And I think that your younger listeners, your current graduates, or people who are just finishing their undergrad or their masters or so on, I think that they will actually find there may be opportunities to get into this career way much earlier on than they currently can. And that can only be a good thing. And I'm very excited. I'll be spending the next 2 years looking to see how this evolves as well. So please, everybody, watch this space. It will no longer be an old person's job or an older person's job. We absolutely want the bright graduates, the people who are really driven to do food safety well, and who are willing and wanting to travel and learn and do more. This is going to be your space in the next 2 years. So please keep an eye on it. I promise you things are happening.
Well, thank you so much, Gordon, for sharing that. I'm really excited to hear more about that because I've always thought that from what I've heard, becoming an auditor is, like you said, skewed to the older generation and those that are younger. It's confusing and, it feels so unattainable. So it's great to know that the organization is trying to actually, change that image and also give the skills I can
Absolutely.
imagine. So before I do let you go, I always like to ask my guests, where can people find you?
So people can find me. Even though I'm older, as I said, I do have Facebook, but I just keep that for friends. I am on LinkedIn. That's probably the only platform I currently use professionally. And I am still led to believe I am the only Gordon Hayburn in the world. So Hayburn is not a particularly common surname, and then Gordon is an even less common first name. So I think if you type Gordon Hayburn food or Gordon Hayburn food safety into Google, you will find out a lot more about me than probably should be. You'll find out I show and judge dogs. You'll find out I am a qualified Scottish country dance teacher, but you will also find out how to connect with me on LinkedIn. So please do. I continue to look to grow my network and will help where I can. And if organizations want me to come and chat with them, and I do occasionally, because as I was a professor at university for 10 years, I do occasionally speak at schools and colleges and so on. More than happy to try and encourage people's passion in this. So you will find me primarily on LinkedIn, and then watch the space because it's common knowledge now. But on the 30th of June this year, I will be leaving my job at Trophy Foods, where now, having been in the industry for 40 years, I feel I'm probably now able to offer consultancy services. So I will be starting my own consultancy business in July. So yes, you'll see more of me being, around the social media, other platforms.
Lovely. Well, thank you once again, Gordon, for taking time on the show. I'm so happy to be able to share this conversation, and I hope our audience gets as much out of it as I did.
And me too. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and please, I love seeing the future of a young generation. You are the future of food safety, and I promise you, we need you, and we want you in our industry. So hopefully, if I've inspired anyone to keep asking questions, I will also have achieved something to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, so much for listening to episode 74 of the FoodGrads Podcast. All the notes to this podcast can be found by clicking on the FoodGrads website and clicking on the Student and Grads tab. If you are listening to this podcast on Spotify, now you can directly interact with us. Spotify has just introduced a feature where you can respond to question and answers about each podcast episode. I have included it in all of our podcast episodes, so drop a hi if you're listening. If you are on another podcast service, then I am sorry they don't have this feature, but that doesn't mean that you can't reach us. Reach out to us on any of our social media platforms. I swear I'll get the message somehow. And hopefully Apple rolls out this feature out in the future. Once again, thank you to our partner Careers Now for their continued support of this podcast, so we can continue to deliver great conversations like the one you just heard. Have you ever considered a career as an auditor? I wonder how many of us actually have, because I keep hearing that we need to bring more people into this role, which makes sense because they're so integral to our food safety system. But I do know that this is in part attributed to the fact that auditors need a certain degree of work experience and training. For many people who are new to food safety, they might not be aware of this credentials being needed and figure this out a little bit too late. So here's my call. If you're listening to the podcast, food auditing does exist, and we do have an article over on the website on food auditing. I'll make sure to link that in the notes about how to become a food auditor and the different types that there are. Of course, check out food safety conferences like Gordon said in the episode. Regardless, I really enjoyed listening to Gordon's philosophy on the subject of auditing. He has set himself on a path of food safety, and look at everything that he's accomplished. A successful career that has brought him a lot of joy, but has also helped others as well. Gordon has shown that you can build a lifelong career in food safety. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you everyone so much for listening, and I will see you next time.